Continuing our series at looking at Avengers relaunches, all the Avengers relaunches, the number ones and the ways the series got kicked off, we're heading over to Mighty Avengers. This comic has a lot going into it, and one of the stranger relaunches. So let's explain why. Hey everybody, this is Perch. There's a lot of things about the Mighty Avengers #1. This is by Brian Michael Bendis. It's by, I had to do a quick edit there. I was going to say Amadeus Cho. No, it's Frank Cho. It is, it's weird how the mind works. Anyway, and by the way, I want to say with all these Avengers issues that I'm doing, there is a 100% chance I'm going to not get these out in the right order. I'm going to forget something. There's just so many as you spider into all the different relaunches. I'm not doing the limited series, meaning, you know, I did do West Coast Avengers because that became a series. I'm not doing things like Avengers Fantastic Four #1. That might be a fun thing to do in the future, but right now I'm just trying to stick to the core titles that were at least attempted as ongoings. But there's a lot of there. At any rate, Mighty Avengers comes into the scene kind of from a weird place. It was following up from the aftermath of Civil War, where Captain America and Iron Man fought. And the Avengers, the New Avengers, was fractured at the time. The ongoing title was New Avengers, not Avengers, which we talked about already. And this team was kind of splintered into two. And we had the Mighty Avengers basically came as Iron Man's team to lead the initiative. And this is where they're going to have the 50 states teams going on. And they're going to have the official SHIELD government-sanctioned Avengers team. And what all that looked like. And in the context and the backdrop of, you know, Luke Cage is running around with his own Avengers, and Spider-Woman was kind of flipping back and forth between the two teams, and the Skrulls were around, and so a lot of things were going on. This was an interesting event because, or issue, because it was sandwiched between the Civil War event and the impending secret invasion attempt. And as a result, this comic feels like a stopgap to a lot of sense. But getting right into it. So first off, we have Frank Cho doing the artwork. It's very nicely rendered. I mean, it's a lot of people kind of, I think, excuse him off as a cheesecake artist, and I think that's pretty unfair because he's drawing the backgrounds, he's drawing the monsters, he's drawing the characters. There's a lot going on. His work looks nice and clean, sharp. And to kind of write him off as the guy who draws boobs, I think is leaving 95% of his skill off the table, and he's bringing that here. So a lot going on. Brian Michael Bendis is trying a few new things. He leans heavily into the thought bubble in this issue, and also we're doing time skip stuff. We're doing current events, and then we're doing leading up to the events. We're going back and forth a lot. This is something, the time skip thing is something Bendis will do quite a bit in his career. The thought bubble kind of went away and didn't get used. The thought bubble had, weirdly, despite the fact that we got both speaking word bubbles and thought bubbles, in terms of dialogue, this is fairly restrained from your typical Bendis book, definitely more restrained than others. There is an attempt to really push action going on in this title. So as we get into it, we launch right into a monster invasion of New York in Manhattan. This is, comic trope 101. And the Avengers are on the scene. They're the Mighty Avengers, and they've got monsters flying out all over everywhere, and some crazy stuff's happening. And why are they here? We don't know. And okay, who's this team? We got to figure it out. So we time skip back to Iron Man and Captain Marvel, or I guess Miss Marvel at this point. Carol, and this is kind of part of Bendis's elevation of Carol as a more major character. And in this, we're trying to shoehorn a couple things that were done in House of M to elevate her status with Iron Man's trusting her. She's going to manage the team. She is, kind of bickering on the same level as Iron Man. But then through the thought bubbles, we're getting some of her insecurity. We're getting some of the back and forth. There's some odd kind of dialogue. The dialogue just feels clunky is the wrong word, but weirdly manic, I think is maybe the right word. It feels like an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm for everyone. Everybody's got some issues, and the issues are being called out, and they're thinking about each other's issues. And, there's a lot of, it's a very strange, tonally, this feels really strange in a lot of ways. So we get kind of classic Avenger trope, which is we've got to pick a team. So Iron Man is telling Carol, we have everyone at our disposal. Let's pick the best roster. We want you to lead the team. You're going to do it. We're back to some fighting, and we're just, kind of just general monster fighting. But to Bendis and Cho's credit, they're doing a lot to kind of showcase the different abilities. Here's Wonder Man doing something cool. Here's a Sentry doing something cool. Here's kind of the missteps of the team of, try and keep property damage down to a minimum. Sentry immediately, punches a monster into a building. And, Captain Marvel's struggling, or Miss Marvel is struggling with some of the leadership there. And, Iron Man has some new toys. So we're going back and forth, and that's pretty cool. So we flip back, and the meat of the comic, and I think what Bendis really wanted, the story he wanted to tell in this was less the action, although he does it well in this. He wants to tell the story kind of deconstructing the Avengers, of why are the Avengers who they are, who's, what picks an Avenger, what makes a good Avenger, what doesn't. And there's a lot of talking in here about, what's going on, where, what makes a good team. Do you have an all-power team? Do you have you don't need it to, and some, actually, Bendis says something here. There's one panel here that I think is super smart. And it's Captain Marvel, Miss Marvel is saying, we should have an all-powerhouse team. Let's get an all-powerhouse team. And Iron Man saying, the people that we fight don't get that intimidated. And then Miss Marvel saying, can I even finish a sentence? And that's her thought bubble kind of dialogue, which is making Carol simultaneously kind of insecure and unlikable through this comic. It's very strange how she's being built. You're simultaneously building her as a hero and a leader, but you're also putting in flaws that are, good heroes do have flaws, but these are weird flaws to introduce. But here comes the smart part. So Iron Man says, crazy people don't get intimidated. Okay, good, that's smart. Intimidation and firepower isn't all we need. Sometimes we'll need more street savvy. Sometimes we'll need more scientific acumen, some dirty dealers. That's the magic of a great team, plus the magic that comes from the team dynamic that you didn't see coming. That's a clever encapsulation of the Avengers and what's made it work and why it's a unique team and everything else. And I think that it's a good part in the comic. It makes sense. And it fits, so I like it. And then this allows them to segue into kind of the schism that they've had with Spider-Man and with Luke Cage and Captain America, who's dead at this point, and other things, and that's it's setting up the future conflict. I mean, in this issue, it's clear that these teams are going to collide at some point. So we're building to that. Bendis is writing both books, so okay. So we get back to more fight, and we get some stuff. We get the Wasp just straight up murdering a monster, which is a little bit off-brand, but okay. And as we're seeing now the characters come in and do their thing, we're picking the Avengers. So Carol is saying she wants Janet. Great. We're now seeing she wants Wonder Man, and then there's this very, very strange dialogue about kind of Iron Man wondering if Carol's sleeping with Wonder Man. And then she's like, "Oh man, what's going on? Where'd you hear that?" So it just that's part of the what are you doing with this character? It's like on both of them, you're making kind of Iron Man kind of like a stern dad, and Carol is like an insecure whore. I don't know. I can't tell what's going on here. It's weird writing. If your goal is to build up these characters and make them strong. We continue to see the Avengers just murdering monsters all over the place, ripping things off. It's curious because we in the earlier issue we're talking about heroism and these characters needing to inspire and so on, and then we have these characters just murdering creatures. Which okay. We get to the Sentry. There's a disagreement. Iron Man's insistent on the Sentry being here. This panel in context helps a lot for the Dark Avengers. It's coming up later. That's interesting. We get Natasha. We get a weird, very weird, pervy comment about leather, and and then Iron Man kind of flirts with her about who's got the better looking butt or who looks. That again, there's just some dialogue in here that's like, what? It's just kind of, it's more uncomfortable to read than anything else. And finally, the last member of the team we get to is we need a Wolverine plus Thor. This is something Bendis would do a lot of, kind of describing people by other people. Like, we need a Wolverine Thor. And so they, Carol happens to know where to go get one, and that's Ares, God of War, and he's kind of rough and tumble guy. And so we get some talking, we get some salary negotiations, and okay. One of the more weird comments again, Ares is like, they're saying, I'm going to match your salary doing construction. And Ares is like, I make $44 an hour here. And Carol's like, really? Wow, that's a crazy amount. And Iron Man's saying, well, for that kind of money, you better show me some big things. It's like, I mean, $44 an hour is not that much money. I mean, there are people coming out of college getting jobs at Amazon at like 4 times that. I mean, you're asking these people to save the world. I don't know. If we're going to make it about money, then let's make it about money. But yeah, I don't know. I always look at that and I'm like, what? $44? Oh man. We need to open you up to a whole new world, Bendis. But so there's lots of disasters going on in the world. We find out later in the Mighty Avengers that Iron Man has like weather satellites, and somebody's co-opted them and doing crazy stuff. And some conflict between Miss Marvel and Iron Man, and the team are continuing to show some fighting. The Mole Man comes up and gives kind of a very Bendis speech. I told you people, leave us alone. I told you people, I warned you. If you commit me, I'll come back with you, everything I have. This is one of the things that always I am annoyed by with Bendis, is that all the characters and the villains all tend to give the same speeches and same dialogue, and this scenario where you see writers like Claremont or Byrne or Hickman or Simonson or others. Man, Louis Simonson was excellent at this, where everybody had a really unique voice, and that kind of goes away here. But just as the Mole Man's kind of doing his threats, Iron Man's armor starts weirdly liquefying and morphing and changing, and somehow, some way, he turns into like a Cronenberg goo monster, and then he's a silvery, naked clone of Janet that's standing there, and we get the little dialogue box, Ultron Online. So this would be the beginning of Bendis playing a lot with Ultron as a character, and we never really got a great explanation other than its comic books as to why Iron Man could kind of transform into Ultron. I mean, there's a virus, and Hank Pym gets involved and everything else, but this kind of whole skin morph into naked Jan. I mean, of the comic, this seems like the one bit that's going to be, we did this for Frank Cho because he's got some nice clouds, covering the nipples and things, and this is the one part that seems like, what are you doing here? But whatever. It looks pretty. It looks great. It just as a plot point seems a little weird. But that's just me. So the issue ends there. They fight Ultron for a few issues. There continues to be kind of weird back and forth. We get a lot of arguments between Carol and Iron Man. And as the series progresses, we wander into a Venom Carnage bomb, something from Lavernia that maybe was hijacked. And then we're right into, by issue 12, we're into Secret Invasion, which then co-ops the title into flashbacks and has nothing to do with the team. And then we come out of Secret Invasion with the team removed, and we're into Dark Avengers at that point. So this comic felt really like a stopgap of there was no real, the team had no real adventures. We had kind of 2 comic arcs before they immediately go full blown into Secret Invasion, and then the team is rerouted and changed. So it was a very strange. It was a very strange comic that did have some back and forth, and it was definitely in the context of an event. I mean, by issue, I think 6, the Spider-Woman has kind of defected and hung out with them now because she's a traitor, but she's actually a Skrull. This feels like a fill-in for an event as opposed to a comic. Now, does that mean it was a bad comic? No, there were some things that really worked well there. I thought the action sequences worked nice. Some of the team dynamics worked nice, but there are some parts, as I said, the dialogue was clunky as hell in certain areas. And it just, if you are trying as a reader to love this team, then you're prevented from doing that because, after 10 issues, 11 issues, the team goes away. So, that's what you got. So anyway, a very curious style. This is one of the weirder Avengers relaunches that would happen. Definitely would set the tone, kind of like New Avengers did, but for the next several of big talk issues in terms of how the team dynamic, and more explaining the team than the action. But the action here was solid, so kind of a mixed bag. Anyway, what did you think of this comic? Did you like it? Did you hate it? What stands out for you? Leave me a comment below. Like, subscribe, introduce to a friend if you don't mind. Always appreciate that. And thanks for listening.